All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is DeLane Richardson, and I'm here with Caroline Akins, and we are the long-term care ombudsman for Central Alabama Aging Consortium. Thank you so much for joining us today for our third Thursday talk, and today's talk is entitled Fighting Crime Against Senior Citizens. I'm not sure if you know, but June 15th was World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And so we actually had a little event in the park to celebrate or bring awareness actually to elder abuse, because, you know, a lot of people think of child abuse, but elder abuse is very prevalent in our community and in nursing facilities. And so we just want to bring awareness to that and talk about what we can do and how we can prevent it, and you know, the signs of elder abuse. So we're going to get started. We have a PowerPoint to present, and then we also have a little activity at the end to kind of like a demonstration to go along with the presentation. So hang out with us for a little while and we're going to get going. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone. As DeLane mentioned, I'm Caroline Akins, and I'm going to also be reviewing this information with you guys. Let's look at the numbers. In 2020, DHR's Adult Protective Services Division investigated 10,566 reports of elder abuse. Sadly, we know a lot of these reports, a lot of the cases that come in do get reported, but we know that a lot of instances do not get reported, and that happens every year and probably on a daily basis, cases that are getting investigated for abuse and neglect. An estimated 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 60 have experienced some form of abuse.
All right, so let's talk about types of abuse. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial exploitation, and then there's neglect. And we're going to go over each one just so we kind of know the definitions, and then we'll talk about some red flags of those.
The first one we're going to discuss today is physical abuse. Physical abuse is the intentional use of physical pain, injury, or the willful deprivation of a caregiver or other person of services necessary to maintain mental and physical health. Some examples of these include assault involving physical injury or serious physical injury, which may be evident by hitting, striking, cutting, burning, pushing, or shoving, excessively restraining, and physical punishment. I would say these signs are the most obvious whenever we're looking at the different types of abuse and neglect.
So emotional abuse is something that you can't see, like physical abuse. You know, you can see the bruises or the burns, things like that, but emotional abuse can be deep down inside. So emotional abuse is the intentional or reckless infliction of emotional or mental anguish, or the use of a physical or chemical restraint, medication, or isolation as punishment, or as a substitute for treatment or care of any elderly person. So we've seen reports where somebody will just, you know, lock a senior in a room so that they don't have to deal with them. Well, that's a form of emotional abuse because they're being isolated as a punishment for something that they've done, or they're not, you know, a person is not caring for them and just kind of pushing them away. Even can be like restraining them with medications. You know, if you just want to give a bunch of medications so you don't have to deal with the senior, if a caregiver did that, then that's also a form of emotional abuse.
The next form of abuse we will discuss is sexual abuse. And that is any conduct that is a crime, which may include rape, sodomy, or sexual abuse by forcible compulsion or incapacity of the victim. As much as we would like to avoid this and say, well, that doesn't happen in our community, we know that it does. It can happen by a family member, it can happen by a caregiver, anyone who has contact with that elderly individual. So we still must continue to bring awareness to this type of abuse and look for the signs, which we'll discuss in a moment.
All right, so we've got financial exploitation. This is the use of deception, intimidation, undue influence, force, or threat of force to obtain or exert unauthorized control over an elderly person's property with the intent to deprive the elderly person of his or her property, or the breach of a fiduciary duty to an elderly person by the person's guardian, conservator, or agent under a power of attorney, which results in an unauthorized appropriation, sale, or transfer of the elderly person's property. I know that's a lot of jargon, so let me break it down for you. So if a person has a power of attorney, a guardian, a conservator, they're supposed to act in the best interest of that elderly person. You know, they can't sell their property, they can't use their money for things that the elderly did not want them to use that money for. So if a person has a power of attorney, they've figured out that that power of attorney is going to be someone that they trust. And so hopefully that power of attorney, that guardian, that conservator would act according to the wishes of that elderly person. And if they don't, that can often be financial exploitation with regards to money and property and finances.
And then we have neglect, which is the failure of a caregiver to provide food, shelter, clothing, medical services, medication, or health care for an elderly person. Neglect happens every day. And, you know, some signs of this would be if someone's left in their bed for an extended period of time. And it is a little bit harder to see, you know, as opposed to the physical abuse, but it can also mean, you know, look at their, do they look disheveled? How are they looking these days? We need to continue to look and make sure that they haven't lost any weight. Certain things like that are signs, and we'll discuss some more in a moment.
All right, so we know the definitions of the types of abuse and neglect. So let's talk about some red flags. So for physical and sexual abuse, red flags of those would be unexplained fractures, bruises, welts, cuts, sores, burns, torn or bloody undergarments. So these are things, you know, if you were at church and you noticed that an elderly person had a black eye, or, you know, they were disheveled, they had a broken arm, something like that, you know how they usually look. And if you see something that is a little off for them, then that would definitely be a red flag as well. So, and normally, you know, we know that senior citizens can, you know, get their skin caught on a door or something like that and tear, you know, have those little skin tears and things like that. But we're talking about, you know, if you see an unusual bruise or fracture or some kind of sore or something like that, then that's a big red flag that something might be going on.
Red flags of emotional abuse. This could mean unexplained or uncharacteristic changes in behavior, such as withdrawal from normal activities or unexplained changes in alertness, social isolation. You know, is someone normally going to church and never misses a Sunday, and then all of a sudden you see that they're not there 3 Sundays in a row? You know, that could be a tell sign that they are being emotionally abused. And one thing that you want to make sure to do is to ask questions to make sure that they're safe in whatever environment they're living in. A caregiver is verbally aggressive or demeaning, controlling, overly concerned about spending money, or uncaring. A lot of times you can, in speaking to a caregiver, you might get a good feel of this. Are they emotionally abusing that person that they're caring for? Are they cursing at them or upsetting them in any manner? We want to make sure, like I said, to ask questions to make sure that person is safe.
All right, red flag is a financial exploitation. So the person with a caregiver or guardian or conservator, their personal needs are not being met. The elderly person is giving excessive financial reimbursement or gifts for needed care and companionship. Now, we're not talking about, you know, grandmother gives $20 to a grandchild for their birthday. We're talking about they're paying somebody because they need their care, you know, not like a sitter or anything, but, oh, if you'll just take care of me, I'll give you my money, that kind of thing. So the caregiver has control of the elder's finances, but fails to provide for the elder's needs. The elder has signed property transfers, power of attorney, new will, etc., but is unable to comprehend the transaction or what it means. So someone can't just come and all of a sudden decide to be an elderly person's power of attorney, especially if that elderly person is not deemed competent anymore, they're not able to make their own decisions, then they can't decide who will become their power of attorney. And that's when a conservator or guardian needs to come into effect. So, you know, with financial exploitation, the elderly person needs to make their own decisions as to direct their care, and their money shouldn't be used in a way that the elderly person does not want it to be used. And so it just needs to make sure that their needs are being met financially and overall, like their healthcare, medical needs as well.
Red flags of neglect. Lack of basic hygiene, adequate food, or clean and appropriate clothing. Is the elderly person, do they have a smell to them, whereas before they were very clean? Is the caregiver making sure that they're bathed on a regular basis? Are they wearing clothes that are possibly too small for them or too large for them? Another sign of neglect could be that they've lost weight and that their old clothes could be too big. That's another thing to look for. Lack of medical aids such as glasses, walker, dentures, hearing aid, and medications. If any of these are withheld from them, obviously that would not help their quality of life. It would actually cause it to decrease. Person with dementia left unsupervised. I know that we hear a lot about this on the news, and sometimes people can sneak out of the house, but we want to make sure that the caregiver has that house safety locked, and that if there is someone living with dementia, that they are safe inside of their home and do not have access to go outside being left unsupervised. Person confined to a bed, left without care. That's pretty self-explanatory. Is the home cluttered, filthy, in state of disrepair, or with fire and safety hazards? Sometimes an elderly person's home, they could be a hoarder, and in those instances, especially when they reach a certain age, that home should be decluttered. With a caregiver, they should make sure and enforce that all of those things take place, and to make sure that the house is clean. And there's a lot of services in the area, Central Alabama Aging included, that provide homemaker services. So if there is any of these signs, we want to get them, scheduled in to ensure that the house remains clean. But we just want to make sure that the caregiver, and we will discuss that in a moment, has the resources and isn't in it, so it's no longer a sign of neglect.
All right, so let's talk about, we've talked about abuse, financial exploitation, neglect in the community, but it can also happen in long-term care settings, which is a long-term care setting is something like a nursing home, an assisted living, or in Jefferson County, they have board and care homes that we don't actually have in our area. So the federal law gives each long-term care resident the right to quality care and quality of life. This includes freedom from neglect, abuse, exploitation, and misappropriation of property. So the definitions of abuse, neglect, and exploitation are along the same lines in the nursing home. There's just a few extra things to go along with that. So abuse can be verbal, sexual, physical, or mental. And neglect is the failure to provide goods and services to a resident to avoid physical harm, pain, mental anguish, or emotional distress. Neglect may or may not be intentional. So this can be, if staff member of a long-term care facility is not providing care to that resident, that would be neglect in the nursing home. Exploitation, that means taking advantage of a resident for personal gain through the use of manipulation, intimidation, threats, or coercion. So this can be, I'm not going to give you care today if you don't provide such and such for me. So staff members may say that. That's exploitation. Misappropriation, that's the deliberate misplacement, misuse, or exploitation of a resident's belongings or money without the resident's consent. So we get a lot of calls in our office about, missing items in long-term care facilities. So sometimes it's just misplaced, but sometimes, it does come up missing, and often sometimes it is the staff that is taking that. So that is, those are the definitions for abuse in long-term care.
Here are some examples of abuse in long-term care. Some physical ones would be hitting, pinching, shoving, force feeding, scratching, slapping, and spitting. Scalding, ignoring, ridiculing, or cursing a resident could also take place in facilities. And a lot of these, as DeLane mentioned, neglect would be more, it could mean not intentional, but this one would be intentional, not accidentally hitting, not accidentally, dropping on the floor, which we hate to hear, but sometimes accidents do occur. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's physical abuse, but this would be with the intentions of hurting that elderly person in the facility. There's also threats of punishment or deprivation, non-consensual sexual contact of any type, including rape, improper touching, or forcing a resident to perform sexual acts. This could be resident to resident, one resident forcing another resident to do those things. It could also mean a caretaker in the facility could possibly be forcing that resident to do something to them. Then there's rough handling during caregiving or moving a resident. Again, that is with intention to be described as abuse. Taking, using, and or sharing photos or recordings of residents that would demean or humiliate them. The staff are not allowed to take pictures of residents to use for anything other than possibly a Facebook page or something with that resident's consent. So they are not able to share any photos or recordings of them with their friends to demean them in any type of way.
So neglect does occur in long-term care. So some examples of neglect would be incorrect body positioning, which can lead to limb contractures and skin breakdown. And this is if, a staff member is just not positioning the resident in the correct way. They're doing it on purpose. Lack of assistance with toileting or changing of disposable briefs, which causes incontinence. A resident can sit in urine and feces. It causes increased falls and agitation, indignity, and or skin breakdown. So residents in long-term care, especially nursing homes, are supposed to be checked and changed every 2 hours. And so if a resident is left, in a dirty brief for longer than that period of time, then it can be considered neglect, because they do need to be checked and changed routinely. Because if you're sitting in that dirty diaper or brief, they call it, then you're definitely going to have that skin breakdown if it's for a prolonged period of time, which can lead to those bed sores and wounds that we don't want to happen. Lack of assistance with eating and drinking, that leads to malnutrition and dehydration. We have a lot of residents in long-term care that need to either be fed, or they need encouragement to be fed. They need a little help with their meals. And so not helping them with their meals and drinking, getting that hydration can definitely be an example of neglect. Lack of assistance with walking, it leads to lack of mobility. So if a resident is just made to, lay in bed, nobody gets them up and helps them walk down the hallway or keeps them mobile, that's a form of neglect. And then ignoring call bells or cries for help. Each room in a long-term care facility has a call light in it. And so when those call lights are activated, staff should come within a reasonable amount of time to answer those call lights. I know in most facilities, most nursing facilities, they like for a call light to be answered within 20 minutes. If it's going on an hour or so, that is, uncalled for. And so that can be considered neglect. Lack of bathing, it leads to indignity and poor hygiene. Everybody needs a bath. Residents do have the right to refuse to take a shower, to take a bath, but if they're just not being bathed because a staff member doesn't want to do it or hasn't done it, then that's a serious neglect issue. They still have to get clean somehow, because you can't have a resident just sitting in a nursing facility or assisted living without bathing. Lack of assistance with participating in activities of interest, which leads to withdrawal and isolation. So if a resident, is never given the opportunity to participate in activities, or nobody takes them out of their room to the activities, they're just laying in bed 24/7. That's definitely not good for their mental state and can lead to that isolation and withdrawal, and ultimately a decline in their capacity in their medical needs.
Here are some examples of exploitation and misappropriation in long-term care. Not placing resident funds in separate interest-bearing accounts where required. Every resident at a facility has a resident trust account, and the business office manager is responsible for maintaining that account. So we want to make sure that the trust account always has the correct amount of money in it, that it is used for the resident's access only, and that the facility or family member does not use that money inappropriately. Threatening or coercing a resident to give money in order to receive care or services. This could come possibly from a staff member, threatening them, saying that they better give them the money now or else. Sometimes we have heard that staff will ask the resident for money, maybe to go get a drink, or it can be a large amount of money or a small amount of money. But at all costs, it is inappropriate and it is unethical. Using a resident's personal property, such as a TV, phone, or clothing, that should only be used for the resident at that time. Stealing or embezzling a resident's money or personal property, such as real estate, jewelry, or clothing. As I said, all of those should remain with the resident, and the business office manager, once that resident is in a facility, they should make sure that they are being well taken care of and that their money stays with them, that no one is taking anything. We as ombudsman, we do get reports about missing items in facilities. There is a grievance policy there where they must report to the social worker or other administrative staff and report what is missing. And then sometimes the ombudsman gets involved, and we will make sure that that is returned or that the resident is reimbursed if there is a missing item such as jewelry or clothing.
All right, so you've heard us talk about we're the long-term care ombudsman. So what exactly is the role of the ombudsman? And we want you to know that ombudsman means advocate. So the ombudsman program advocates for residents of long-term care facilities, which we've said are nursing homes and assisted living facilities in our area. So we are actually representatives of the office of the state ombudsman. And so our state ombudsman is Virginia Moore Bell, and there are 13 area agencies on aging in our state. And so each area agency on aging has an ombudsman program. So we represent the state ombudsman. And so we work to identify, investigate, and resolve complaints and problems of those residents in long-term care. So we're sometimes more accessible than the Alabama Department of Public Health, which is the regulatory agency for nursing homes and assisted livings. So ombudsman, we actually work with the regulatory agency, which is ADPH, to eliminate abuse, neglect, and exploitation in long-term care facilities. So we're all working together to resolve those complaints and problems of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So sometimes we can go out a little quicker and get out there and see what's going on as far as abuse and neglect. And then we do communicate with public health in instances of abuse and neglect.
So how do we fight the crime of elder abuse in our community? We want to make sure that we report every instance. As you see here, it says, if you see something, say something. It's much better to say something and be wrong than to not say something and for that resident or for that member of the community to actually be getting neglected or abused in the community. We always want to make sure that we say something. There are several hotline numbers here that we have that you can report elder abuse. Please document these, keep these handy. If you want to post them on your refrigerator, text them to a friend. We want to make sure that we can eliminate elder abuse as much as possible in our community. The first one we have is the Adult Abuse Hotline, DHR. DHR goes into homes and investigates complaints. And the number there is 1-800-458-7214. That is the number for the Elder Abuse Hotline there. And then the abuse in a nursing home. The Alabama Department of Public Health, ADPH, they do go out into facilities, nursing homes and assisted living homes to investigate complaints. And they're also the ones that issue the deficiencies for that facility. They go out and do the state surveys on an annual basis. They also go out, if there's a complaint that rises to a certain level, they'll go out on that complaint as well to investigate those concerns and make sure those residents are kept safe in the facility. And you can reach ADPH at 1-800-356-9596. And then also the abuse in an assisted living is also ADPH, and you can reach them. It does have a different number than a nursing home. It's 1-866-873-0366. So please give them a call if you have anything that is concerning to you, and we want to make sure that it all gets reported.
Okay, so a few last thoughts before we get to our demonstration. And don't worry, we're not going to demonstrate elder abuse. Okay, we're going to do something different. But we want to be sure that everybody knows that it's important to have a power of attorney. So a power of attorney is someone that's going to act on your behalf in the event that you are unable to make your own decisions. If you become incapacitated, you get dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that, then that power of attorney is going to act in your best interest. And so this is somebody that you trust. You've decided that you trust them to make the decisions that you would want made, and that they would carry out your wishes. And so it's important to go ahead and establish that. You can do it for healthcare, for financial. It's important to go ahead and establish those because it is somebody that you would trust. And if there is no power of attorney and something happens, then sometimes it becomes likely for a guardian or conservator, and you have to go through the probate court for those. And so sometimes that has to get assigned or somebody has to pay a lot of money to get that done. And so just as a side note, we want to make sure that you know that Central Alabama Aging Consortium does have free legal services to people who are 60 and older. And so our attorney is Lee Jordan in the office, and she's able to draw up and do those wills and power of attorneys for free. And so just to make sure that everybody knows that that is available, and we recommend just going ahead and getting that done, and just making sure that that is an option and that's already taken care of. So that way you don't have to worry about it and you can live your best life, and just move on and be sure that your wishes are going to be carried out. Next, we want to make sure if you're a caregiver, we want to be sure to take time for yourself and eliminate stress. And so lots of times it is often the caregiver that becomes the abuser because they're stressed out. You know, they're taking care of someone with dementia day in and day out, and it's a tasking job. And so, you know, caregivers need to be able to take time for themselves to de-stress, you know, get away, you know, even if it's just to go grocery shopping, just to get away from that person that they're giving care for. Okay, not just to leave them at home and neglect them, that, you know, we want to make sure that somebody is there taking care of them. And so we do want you to know that we do have an Alabama Cares program in our office that actually provides support and education to caregivers that are caring for someone in the home. And so if you need those services, you can definitely call our office. Or if you need ever need some examples about ways to eliminate stress, we're definitely, you know, we can help out with that. And that's actually something that we're going to do. That's part of our demonstration today, is we're going to make stress balls so that, you know, if you find yourself stressed out, would rather you go ahead and relieve that stress than either, you know, taking it out on somebody else or just living with that stress. And so we'll get to that in just a minute. But the last thing we want you to know is that we have copies of our elder abuse prevention toolkit in our office. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But these are toolkits that were put together by the Elder Abuse Prevention Council. They're really good. They have lots of resources for elder abuse, just like, you know, where to call, in addition to the numbers that we've given you today. If there's scams, things like that, they're really helpful, and they're bound books that you can have. So we have a ton of those in our office. And so if you need a copy or you know somebody that does, just feel free to give us a call. And our number is 334-240-4680. And you can ask for DeLane or Caroline, and we'll be glad to send those to you. So last but not least, we're going to get a little creative, and I'm going to stop screen sharing, and we are going to do our little demonstration of making stress balls. So give us 1 second, and we're going to turn on the camera and move this computer. Or maybe we're not. Hold on. Hey guys, sorry, the webcam was not working. So we are going to set up so you can actually see the table. Give us 1 second. Yes. Okay. We are going to make stress balls, but I did want to show you this elder abuse toolkit. We do have these in our office. And so if you need one, just make sure that you give us a call and we'll send them to you. They have lots of information and there's resource pages. So I don't know how well you can see that, but it is just a great resource to have. And so we want to make sure that you know about that. Okay, so we are going to make handy dandy stress balls. And so it's really simple. If you ever find yourself stressed out and you need a little pick me up, you know, it's so fun to have something to fidget with. We know they have fidget spinners and things all the time now. Well, this is something simple. So all you need is a balloon. Caroline already has hers out. You need some rice. Simple. And it works best if you have a funnel. I've done this before without a funnel and the rice goes everywhere. So all you have to do is we're going to take the balloon. We're just going to kind of stretch it out for a little bit. And then we're going to stick that funnel in the top of the balloon. And then we're just going to pour some rice into that funnel. And sometimes you have to kind of shake it and get that rice down in there. Get it going, goes into that balloon. Get it down in there. And then of course, sometimes I get too much in there, so I have to go back over my cup. And you actually want the rice to come to about where the circle meets the top. Okay, so we're gonna get rice to right about there. We're gonna get it good and full, and then we're just gonna pull and we're gonna tie it. And then you've got your little stress ball. Let's see how Caroline's doing. I need to help you. But it's really simple. You can make one for each hand, you know, just giving you something, because we'd rather you mash on your stress ball than mash on someone else. Okay, so so this is just a really simple thing. It's things that you have in your home, but you can make a stress ball. You can also use flour, but it tends to get a little more messy. So I recommend the rice, but like I said, I'm not sure how long the rice would last, but just in case, you know, you always have balloons on hand, hopefully, birthday parties and things like that, and always have some rice. So, and just take that funnel out of the kitchen and you've got a simple stress ball. So we just hope that today you have learned something about elder abuse. We definitely want to prevent that. And that's part of our job, you know, is working in long-term care, that we want to eliminate elder abuse in facilities and also in our community. So if you ever have any questions or need any help, feel free to call our office at 334-240-4680. We have a ton of services in our office, not just the Ombudsman program, but like we've talked, legal services, Alabama Cares. We have a Senior RX program that helps with prescriptions. We have an ADRC program that helps with our intake and aging, excuse me, and disability resource center. Sorry guys, I've been talking too much. So if you need us, just give us a call and we're glad to help out. Thanks guys.
Thank you so much.